So I can call the meeting to order since we do have a quorum. So we will go through the items on the agenda in the order in which they appear. There is one item that has been a request by the appellant for deferral, and that is ZAP-24-8. So if you are here to speak on that matter, just know we will not be covering that. I think that covers the agenda. All communications that we have received have been posted, and then minutes for past meetings are available. One thing that I do want to say for this meeting is that we are expecting a relatively long agenda. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to cover before we started, just to keep us moving along. The first one is that when we get to each agenda item in the public hearing, I will swear in all parties at once. So please pay attention and use the raise hand feature on Zoom when your agenda item comes up so that we can enable you to speak, so that we can hear your response on the swearing in and cover that at the start. And then before you speak, just be sure to provide your full name and your mailing address so we can keep you notified. As a reminder for everyone, we have read all of the submitted written materials, so there's no need to repeat what's included in those posted materials. And because we are expecting a long agenda, and I want to make sure that we can hear from everyone, we are going to put in place a time limit for the testimony and the response to that. So the initial testimony would be 6 minutes. And then for any questions after that, we'll give 2 minutes. I will keep track of that and let you know when you have a minute remaining. So with that, we can get into our first agenda item, which is ZP-24-317, 251, 253 South Union Street, Daisy Properties. Do we have the applicant for this project?
I'm looking for the applicant on Zoom, Caitlin. I'm not seeing them. If you're with the applicant team for this item, raise your hand so I can enable you to speak. They aren't here yet, Caitlin. We could always come back later.
And then, so our next agenda item is ZAP-24-8. Do we need to take action on this one to defer it as a appeal?
They followed up with me and requested specifically the November 19 DRB meeting. So I think if the board acts to defer it to that date and time certain, that will take care of it.
Someone
So moved.
Miles, so moved. Do I have a second? Brad seconds that. All those in favor of moving that agenda item to November 19th?
Okay, great.
Aye.
Okay. We will move along to the third agenda item, ZP-24-59, 44 Wright Avenue. Do we have the applicant for this item?
I'm going to be recusing myself on this one.
Okay.
Yep, we do have the applicant team. If you're on the applicant team, I see at least one of you, but raise your hand. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 on the applicant team. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I imagine, Caitlin, we have a number of folks from the public looking to speak to this item as well. Do you want to do that with the applicant team or separately?
Yeah, please. So if you want to speak on this item, or you think you might speak on this item, if you can use the raise hand feature in here, so then I can swear everyone in at once. Just checking.
About Wright Avenue? There is several people that are supposed to be coming.
Okay, it looks like everyone can speak who's raised their hand now.
Okay, for those looking to speak on this agenda item, if you can raise your right hand, do you swear that the testimony you give today is true and correct under pains and penalty of perjury?
I do.
I
do.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And so now over to the applicant, if you want to give us a short overview of the project.
Yeah, my name is Rob Cohn. Can you folks see me? I'm just on a different device than usual, but yes, I hope anyone, Caitlin can nod maybe.
We can't see you.
Can't.
So Rob, we can hear you.
Is that fine? You'd like keep it that way, or?
Do you want to display or not?
I don't want it to display, but
Scott, I would like to share my screen if you can, because we have a presentation. We'll keep
Okay.
it brief to Caitlin's, request, but we
Okay.
do have some images.
All right, just a second.
And while you're getting Sam up there, Scott, I just want to voice over just the intro on who we are and what we're trying to do here, and then Arthur and Sam from TWA would be great if they could take the lead to go through the presentation. Again, my name is Rob Cohn. I'm of Delta Properties, and we're a local Pine Street based owner management group. There's a few properties we own right here in the region, and that's what we're trying to invest in. So with this project, we're looking forward to adding 3 or 4 units and chip away at housing shortages. We're also working to preserve the historic existing structure on the site. And overall, we are members of the community here, and we want to further invest in this area and work on the historic building at the same time. So we worked through the conservation board and incorporated feedback. We also incorporated DAB feedback, and that's really where we are today, and we're really happy to present this submission. So if Arthur and Sam, if you folks wouldn't mind, that's an all right spot to pass it off to your background.
If you're speaking, we are not hearing you. You might be on mute.
Thank you, Caitlin. I was halfway through my spiel, so I'll repeat. My name is Sam Beal. I am a principal at Duncan Vishnesky Architecture. And as Rob mentioned, we presented this to the DAB earlier this year. Recently came back after incorporating some feedback that we heard from the neighborhood. In terms of what that, why is it not letting me go to the next slide? Here we go. So can you see my slide that says neighbor and board concerns? Yes. So this is what we heard from the neighborhood in the first presentation to the DAB. Concern about parking. We heard, we understand that there are concerns about parking within the neighborhood. Delta Properties is working with adjacent property owners to try to get some off-site parking to serve their tenants. There were environmental concerns about the some activity that may have taken place on site under previous ownership. We've conducted a phase 2 environmental report, which is included, that found no issues. There were concerns about views. We do not have any public views impacted in this project. There were also concerns about scale, because we're adding a 3-story structure to a neighborhood that does have 3-story structures, but our existing structure is 2 stories. And that leads into the concerns about compatibility with the historic district. So we took these considerations to heart and redesigned the project and came back to the Design Advisory Board earlier this year in September and received a 3-to-1 favorable opinion. So in terms of the views that folks are concerned about, these are the views from the public way. And so primarily we will be seeing the new structure there. You can kind of imagine where those 2 trees are currently will be where the new structure is. But we do have existing 3-story historic structures within the neighborhood that are part of the contributing resource of this historic district. So we do have something of a leg to stand on in terms of the compatibility. We also have some infill projects that exist in this neighborhood that show you that there are some scale issues. In 2017, you can see over on Proctor Place, a new structure was installed next to an existing structure that's quite literally larger. And in 1989, we have a 3-story structure that was added to the neighborhood that's within throwing distance of our project. And so I just wanted to encourage the board to remember that we have compatibility that we want to meet with. We want to understand this historic neighborhood and augment it, but we do need to acknowledge that there's change over time. This neighborhood has changed and will continue to change. And so to that end, it's a beautiful neighborhood and we are excited to be adding more homes to this neighborhood. Lastly, it's an eclectic neighborhood. We have a new project over on Central. We have a former train car living in a backyard. This is not a pristine historic neighborhood by any stretch. It has shown change over time. And so the rest of our presentation is primarily slides related to what we've submitted to the board and to the zoning office. So rather than belabor the details of our project, I will stop now and allow the DRB to ask any questions you might have of us.
Thank you. I appreciate getting to the point. Does anyone on the board have questions for the applicant?
I was trying to unmute myself there. Can you go to the landscape plan that you've got?
Yes.
Okay. So if I read this right, everything is happening between the building and the rear of the property. That's the landscaping, and there's a little parking area behind the.
There is a parking area behind, yes, and we do have extensive native plantings on the northwest corner to create a vegetated buffer to the lake.
And then the driveway is a green belt down the middle, and
Yes,
driveway material?
those are it says poured in place concrete strips for the wheels, Brad, and then grass in between.
I was just trying to get a sense of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, and I don't know if that fits the street or not. Are there street trees in the greenbelt? No.
We do not have, there is a street tree beyond, but I don't think we have a street tree currently in the green belt.
We do have a little bit of planting in front of that ramp, which we're not showing in this rendering, Brad.
Yes, we are. There is some planting in front. Thank you, Arthur.
When you're saying front, you mean on the street side?
Yes, on the
Yes.
street. Can you see my mouse, Brad?
Yeah, I see it. It's not
Okay.
moving.
Okay, so this
that's
area
my-
here,
my
if we
mouse,
flip
that's-
back to the landscape plan, there is some plantings on the street side of the project. Let's see here.
So you got a couple
So we have,
of shrubs there.
let's see, 4 Fothergilla witch alder there. And an existing lilac bush on this side here.
And the house to the, which way am I looking here? East is a corner house, right? So
This one, yes?
Yeah.
Mhm.
and there's no street trees from there to the corner, I take it. shows
On the
up.
plan, I see a street tree here, but I'd have to go back to Google Street View to know exactly what's happening there.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a street tree here and then another tree here on the other side of the curb cut.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just the parking situation and how you envision kind of how people are gonna fit in, but then be able to get out, right? It's all one long driveway, right?
One long driveway, yes. We have 3 parking spots in the rear. In terms of getting back out, they'll have to back out and then, proceed down the driveway. So
Is there, for that northernmost parking space, is that little turnaround jut out actually long enough for that to be a
they might
turnaround?
have to do I don't know for sure, Caitlin. They might have to do a couple 2-point turn or so to get out, but I don't think there's a curb here, so you should be able to kind of back your car out a little bit further than the paving shows in order to, get far enough back to turn around and get out the driveway.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, I'll follow up with one question. So in the initial presentation, you said you're working with the neighbors to find, or the neighborhood to find other parking options.
Yes.
What's the story with that?
Rob, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the plan is as soon as we can get working on this and have the need, we'd contract with Ride Your Bike for parking in that large lot, which is before the railroad bridge. And then additionally, if that were to be developed, we'd work to continue that contract into the mobility type garage, if, as long as that's an option. And so the intention here, as if Sam can hop in as well, is just to try to make this as bikeable and walkable as a property as we can, and accommodate bike storage and safe areas. And then if these folks do need to really travel and head to their car that's for a weekend trip, we would want that to be contracted and be secured for them, but not be on the site here.
And where is that lot? On Lakeside?
It's on Lakeside, the large lot before the railroad bridge.
Isn't that the one where the housing is being proposed?
Certainly, and that as soon as when that would occur, we would move to the garage that would be built. If that development works its way from north to south through the lot, we'd move our contracted spots through the lot and then ultimately to a garage. Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I will add my last question, which goes off of Brad's about street tree. If we asked you to put in a tree in front of the property on the street and work with the city arborist on that, do you have any concerns with that request?
Rob.
Yeah, really quick, if I can take it from you, Sam. There currently is or was a tree that was removed for sidewalk work last year, or revised sidewalk that actually is like a jut, which is seen in the landscape plan, how there's like an odd, just kind of sidewalk shape right where the driveway curb cut's coming in. So there was I think a large, maybe silver maple, maybe box elder. Anyway, happy to accommodate, and that's I hope the area in the greenbelt that it could replace when Public Works took it out last summer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? If you could please use the raise hand feature, or if you're in the room.
Caitlin, do you want me to stop sharing or do you want me to keep the drawings up?
I think you're fine to keep them up just in case anyone has questions about one of those. It will be easy for you to bring that up.
Happy to
I
do it.
saw Sharon Busher raise your hand first. If you can unmute yourself and share your thoughts. If you can, again, keep your commentary brief, that would be helpful.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Sharon Busher, and I don't live in that neighborhood, but I've been following this project. My concern has been regarding the 2 large trees that are being removed on the property. I'm glad to hear the DRB saying that they would like a tree in the tree belt. I have a silver maple in front of my house, and I guard it with my life, basically. Trees are really important environmentally, and I don't think we as a city take this seriously when we cut down a mature tree and replace it with a twig. So I'm very concerned about that, and I would like to know if indeed the people in charge could state whether or not those trees were healthy that are being removed. And if not, you have eliminated all shade for the inhabitants of that property. And I think a neighborhood is made up of structures and landscape and trees. So I'm concerned about this aspect. So thank you so much.
Thanks to Sharon. For the applicants, if you don't mind, I'm going to take all the public comment, and then if you would like to address any of it, you are welcome to. So Tom, I see you have raised your hand as well. If you would like to unmute yourself and share your comment.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've got a couple of issues to address.
Before you jump in, can you just share your full name and then where your mailing address, so we know that?
Yeah, my name is Tom Freiheit, and I'm a resident in the Lakeside neighborhood. And I'd like to draw your attention on page 7. There's a map of the Steep Slopes District. And nearly the entire property is shaded in red, indicating it's part of the Steep Slopes overlay. And then on page 13, section 5.3, it states that all new development and redevelopment projects that require a zoning permit shall be required to demonstrate compliance with the standard in Article 3. It also states on the bottom of page 14, and I quote, "The proposed development area," these are notes from the zoning board, "the proposed development area, however, falls within the scope of adjacent lands within 50 feet of the top of the slope. See red measurements in parentheses." And then it says, "and will be subject to steep slopes review standard unless the plan is revised to eliminate redevelopment within the 50-foot measurement." The map that I saw has a measurement of 44 point something feet from the steep slopes. So for this reason alone, I believe the project needs to be reevaluated and not in good faith be approved as it stands. It is less than 45 feet and doesn't meet the 50-foot setback from the steep slope as illustrated. And then on another note, on page 3, table 44.5-17 states that a 75 setback shall be required from the ordinary high water mark of Lake Champlain. 5 in section B, it states, "If the setback from the waterfront of existing principal structures within 100 feet on either or both sides of a subject lot is less than the minimum requirement, the setback for the subject lot may be reduced to the average of such neighboring structures." Then the applicant's notes use 36 and 56 Wright Avenue. But there is a correction made that instead of 56, they want to use 9 Central Avenue. And it's noteworthy that 9 Central is not on the side, it's in the rear on an entirely different street. The notes refer specifically to either or both sides, which would literally, in fact, be translated 3856 Wright Avenue. Using these two properties on either side would put them well over the 61.5-foot setback that they're referencing in the plans. We believe this would require the project to use a minimum of 75 feet as required and stated in table 44.5-1, number 7. So for these reasons, we believe the project needs to be denied today until such a time that these standards can be met, if they even can be met. I think that the site plan that is up demonstrates how they are skirting on every level, making this thing fit in this property. And I do believe you were asking good questions about the parking, and I think there could be 7 to 14 cars here. And we know from the Hula parking that they're not supposed to use the street here, but they do. And currently there are 5 cars typically parked behind the 3 units that are in that building. They're going to have 7 units with 3 spaces. I know parking isn't required, but it's still something that we have to deal with as residents. And I do also believe that because this site is so tight, I don't think those 3 spaces are going to be easy to turn around or maneuver at all. And I think it might even be that they won't have 3 cars back because of how tight it is. I would be curious to mock that up and see how a car could manage in that space. And they're reusing everything they can. You know, they're using the driveway for sidewalks and for, you know, walkways and ramps, and it's really a tight spot, and it just really feels jammed in there. So anyway, those are my points that I wanted to make. The driveway wasn't really one of them, but I'm looking at it, so I thought I would comment.
Thank you
for the time.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Couple of those things. Mary, is this your project?
Let me unmute myself. Yes, it is.
The way that I read the staff report on steep slopes is that you had used the steep slope standards in the way that it was applied. So that has been addressed. The way the application has come through, it has been reviewed under steep slope standards, correct?
It has been. The engineering firm provided a topo map showing us the change in grade, where the top of the slope is, and did calculate what that measurement is from the top of the slope. If they are within the 50-foot top of the slope, and it appears they are in the northwest corner, then they can have engineering support to confirm the stability of the slope and suitability for development.
Thank you. And then in terms of the setback concerns, Mary, I just, if you
yeah,
could...
this is what I was just searching for. There is a site plan, and perhaps if Sam is driving the boat here, he can show those measurements from the waterfront, and it doesn't make any sense to identify the corner property as a setback from the waterfront because it doesn't have any water frontage. So the properties on either side have been identified, and here we go, right here. My point is the property on the far north is 9 Central, and it's a misidentification in the key, what the measurements are, which property they're identified with. So there is the calculation, the setbacks to the waterfront on either side, both north and west of this property. They do have the ability to average those And if they are less than the 75 feet, they may use that as their setback. And that is the calculation the applicants have used.
Thanks, Mary.
Sure.
Would the applicant team like to address any of the commentary that you heard as well beyond what we just discussed?
Caitlin, if I can interject, there's one person at Pine Street who's looking to comment on this as a member of the public.
Can I speak to that, Caitlin, or do you want to wait until
yeah, let's wait until
Okay.
we have this last comment. It looks like you're unmuted now at Pine Street. If you wouldn't mind telling us your name and your mailing address, and then sharing your comment briefly, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hi, my name's Bruce Alice. I live at 35 Wright Ave, across the street. And I'd just like to mention a couple of things. Tom already mentioned about the cars. There's currently 5 or 6 cars there. And it used to be my house. I sold it to him. And the driveway on the right-hand side, the edge of the driveway to the house is 16 feet. The current driveway is 9 feet and 7 feet from the driveway to the house. Now, you're going to put a ramp alongside the existing house. You want to be careful because those are slate roofs and all the ice comes off. It'll land right on the handicap walkway around there. There's no protection for that. The other thing, the parking situation's a real bad thing, but it's already been mentioned. Now, my other question is, the second tree that you want to cut down, that is not on the 44 Wright Ave lot. It's on the other lot of the other house. Are both those properties owned by the same people?
The application that we have before us is just for the 44 Wright. So
that second tree is on the other property.
I can't really speak to that other than what we're seeing in the site plan.
Yep.
But if you have any other comments to share, I'd be happy to hear
Yeah,
them.
if you look at the surveys, markers, you can see it. Slate roof parking. And on the other side, towards the lake, there's only about 4 feet from the existing house to the other property line. That seems really short. Put another building 4 feet from the other property on the west side. And that's my comments.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
It looks like we have someone else from the public has raised their hand while we are hearing this comment. Diane, if you would like to unmute yourself and share your comment.
Yes, thank you. I would like to address some concerns regarding the project. And also I'm wondering if more details could be provided. It was very difficult for me to discern from the maps, perhaps in commentary. I'm wondering how the project was reduced by 10%, down from 70 something to 61% lot coverage. I couldn't quite make that out. It doesn't appear that many changes were made, and it does seem like, I know there's pervious pavers, etc., but I couldn't really tell, and would appreciate knowing whether that standard was met, and maybe more details would be helpful.
Are you referring to, there is an allocation for certain features don't count against?
Yes.
So it's not the project getting smaller. There's just certain features that don't count in the same way towards that lot coverage.
I understand. I was just not seeing much of a difference except for a 200 square foot area of grass that was put in a grass strip in the driveway, but perhaps someone can educate me at any rate. Okay. I would like to mention that scale, I'm just going to say this, although I think it's a moot point at this point. Scale does continue to be a concern. Tom and I are the folks who built 14 Central Avenue. And when we did, we worked with the city and the design advisory board closely, and they asked us to reduce the height of the building, which was a 35-foot height. The top to our peak is 32 feet. This building will be almost 42 feet. And that's a big difference. It is not about it not being a 3-story building. It's about scale. And the neighborhood did object to this project with the design advisory board on that basis. Moving on to parking. People have already said it. I personally, we all believe we're working with the city and Hula right now to try and find a solution to this. The reality is this: you can have a lease, you can have a contract. This is a long walk from that driveway. And right now, the Hula employees who are supposed to park there do not park there, and they park on our streets. I think it's a lot to ask of residents in that location, or to think that they would park, a quarter mile or so away and walk to their house every night. So we all kind of feel that as well. That continues to be a concern in our neighborhood in particular, and we're doing our best to work on it. But I want to name that this will add a significant burden. I thank you for answering the steep slopes question. I was just puzzled by, I didn't see that there was a waiver for that 50 feet. So I heard from Mary that there was perhaps an engineering report done. So I would, if there was one, I would appreciate knowing that, or what the status is on an engineering report relative to the steep slopes. And finally, I'd just like to talk about the zoning permit itself and my concern about the zoning permit lists 44 Wright Avenue as being submitted under neighborhood code 2A-24-2. And the description of the project has also been amended as a planned unit development with the construction of an additional principal structure. And I'd just like to state that on August 27th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on various amendments to the neighborhood code, including amendments to the PUD project size standards, table 11-1-3. And this noticed pending CDO amendment draft that I believe is on public record, and if not, doesn't matter. It's the Planning Commission had a public hearing on it. Establishes a minimum lot size for PUDs in the RM district of a ½ acre. And the lot at 44 Wright Avenue is substantially smaller than that, obviously. And additionally, the Planning Commission is still working on secondary structure height. There's currently a November 1 date associated with new projects. And we believe it would be inappropriate to approve this project under the current conditions with draft amendments already in place at the City Council and the Planning Commission. I just want to share that I also noted at the September 24th Planning Commission meeting that I attended that the Planning Commission defines a principal or primary structure as applying to buildings that are street facing and secondary structures that are not street facing, that are behind, as was set up in the neighborhood code. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. With that, I will pass it back to the applicant team. Is there anything in that comment that you would like to address?
Well, I think that Mary addressed the Tom's questions about the averaging of the two adjacent properties for the setback from the lake. I just wanted to say that we worked closely with Mary and Scott on that and reviewed it with the Conservation Board. And so I believe our interpretation is correct. I would like to say that Bruce's point about snow falling on the ramp is a good one, and that we'll take that into consideration, perhaps with some snow guards on that roof. We don't want to put anybody in danger. In terms of Diane's question about the reduction in lot coverage, you'd be surprised, Diane, how much lot coverage was reduced when we went to the driveway strips in lieu of a full driveway, which is what we had previously. That reduced quite a lot of the lot coverage. Arthur, was there anything else that we did when we changed the design that reduced the lot coverage that you can speak to?
There's only minor things besides the driveway,
Yeah.
but every little bit counted.
Yes, yes. So, and in terms of Diane's speaking to her experience about reduction of the height of her home, and when she got her permitted structure in 1989, we did reduce the height of this structure from the previous application. We had previously had a design that allowed for 9-foot ceiling heights in the apartments, and we reduced that such that they're all now 8-foot ceiling heights. And so we reduced, we also moved the first floor down. So all in all, we changed this design from the first application to reduce the height. As far as the parking goes, I understand the concern about parking within the neighborhood. I am also a Burlington resident, and the streets are a shared resource that we all share as citizens of this fair city of Burlington. And while I understand the pressure that this neighborhood has, I do think that it is a community resource. And if people who choose to live at 44 Wright Avenue choose to park on the street, I think that's in their rights. I also believe that we reduced or eliminated the parking ordinance for the very reason to facilitate projects like this. So to that end, I think what we have in front of us today is a project that is clearly permittable. Some people may not like the zoning ordinance as it is currently constituted, but we are striving to meet that ordinance and meet the urgent need for more housing in our community.
Thank you. Just before we close this one up, any other questions from the board, since we heard a fair amount of public comment?
Yeah, this is Miles. I just have a question for those who live there. Is Wright Avenue or Central Avenue a resident parking only street? And has that ever been discussed with the neighborhood?
I know it's been discussed, Miles, but I don't believe it's been acted upon.
Caitlin, if I may, I would just like to address the ordinance change issues. This is still considered under the neighborhood code. The neighborhood was upzoned from low density residential to medium density RM. That opened the door to a PUD with no minimum lot size. There have been conversations in the Planning Commission about changes to PUD, and for the moment, those are being put aside as they're advancing more discussion about secondary structures. But not to confuse you, this is not a secondary structure and a primary structure. A planned unit development allows more than one principal structure on a lot, and that's where the basis of this application.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate that clarification. Seeing no other comment, we can close the public hearing on this item. And I'm hoping that we can go back to ZP-24-317, 251, 253 South Union Street, if we have the applicant team on this
We
item.
have applicant Caitlin. James Dufour.
Hello.
Okay, just since you were not here at the beginning, we're in the middle of a very long agenda, so we are keeping testimony short to 6 minutes for initial and then 2 minutes to address any individual questions that come up. And then we'll be swearing in anyone who wants to speak on this item all at the start. So if anyone wants to speak on this agenda item, which is ZP-24-317, 251, 253 South Union Street, please use the raise hand feature. If you're in the room, let staff know. Okay. And then I will swear you in. If you would raise your right hand, do you swear that the testimony you give today is true and correct under pains and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, over to the applicant team. If you would give us a very brief overview, and then we can address any questions from the board.
Sure. The application is for three 1,800 square foot 4-unit buildings. As mentioned before, this is primary structures underneath a planned unit development. They are all approximately 1,350 square feet and located on this flag lot. Two of the buildings are in the back on the west, and one is adjacent to the previous structure, which was a law firm that we recently converted into apartments.
Anything else that you wanted to share, or should we jump in with questions?
You can jump in with questions.
Okay. I will start us off. I have a question about what looks like the pedestrian access, especially for buildings A and building B, and how you picture that connecting over to the sidewalk on the street. Because it looks like there's some gaps.
There is a gap across the parking lot. I think that was envisioned to be painted as a walkway across the parking lot there.
So you envision the primary pedestrian pathway going along the southern edge of the property there, kind of straight across to the sidewalk?
Oh, no. If you look, there's a walkway coming from the northeast corner of the property that comes down between building C and the existing building.
Yep.
And then across the greenway, and then across that parking lot to the path that goes down the south edge to buildings A and B.
Got it. So the gap is between buildings B and C on that edge of the parking lot, and that's where the intention is to paint an area of that. So it wouldn't be parking all the way up to the edge.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have questions?
Actually, isn't it parking all the way there? I mean, basically they have to cross the parking lot to get to the sidewalk on the street. Isn't that true?
They do. I mean, they're only crossing 4 parking spots of parking lot, so.
Well, it's the traffic. I mean, you could run a sidewalk along the north side of the parking lot, get to the sidewalk that way, to the public sidewalk there.
Yeah, I think we could run along the northern edge of the parking lot, and then down around to A and B, but I think naturally people are going to cut across the grass and cut across the parking lot anyway. No matter how we try to redirect them. We attempt to.
I have a question about the long-term bike parking. There was a note in the staff report talking about kind of how far the long-term bike parking is from, I think it's building C, but the northeast new building, as well as, I mean, the other existing building. Is there objection on your part from adding a second shed to building C, or kind of in that little grassy area there?
I don't object to it. No, certainly not. I think if we're going to do that, the natural place to do it would be kind of in the nook of the existing building. There is a back deck with an overhang that we might be able to take advantage of.
Okay. And then the other question just on the long term, because there's not a lot of detail in the current plans other than it will be here. Is that going to be, secured like resident access bike parking? I know this area has, I would say, a elevated incident of like bike theft and things like that. And so I would be a little bit concerned for people just leaving, if it were just kind of a shed without any restricted access or anything like that.
I absolutely agree. There is a plan to have a covered and restricted access between building A and B. I mean, I also live downtown right now, and I would not leave a bike outside, no matter how it was protected, given the enthusiasm of the bike thieves. I don't know. But yeah, we would definitely do our best with a locked and access parking area.
And then kind of secondary question on the short-term bike parking. I see the ULOC, which is good. It does say 3 bike capacity. It's my general experience that those are two at an optimal level, just side by side, because you do want two kind of lock points. It sounded like, there's a general area kind of designated for it. Is your idea like one of those, a few of those? What does the short-term bike parking look like?
I think there was a detail that was added by Steve with the detail of the bike parking, but I don't have that in front of me right now. I think short-term bike parking could be certainly more than two if we needed to. I'm not against bike parking. I think that leaving bikes outdoors in Burlington is a bad idea.
For sure, but it's still nice as somebody who commutes primarily. Like I wouldn't leave a bike out overnight, but having a place to, right, if I'm going, like if I go to friends who are renting downtown, sometimes one of the frustrations is I have to bring my bike inside even for short trips because I can't like just lock up, or sometimes it's blocks away. And so it's nice to just have like some short-term bike parking for like a couple of hours to visit somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think in this case, certainly for the Western units, if I were to visit them, I would put my bike on the porch and lock it to the porch. Just for optimum visibility and being able to see it all the time. But I'm certainly not against adding a few more bike spots if that's.
Yeah, I think if you're not objected to it, I think like a reasonable, maybe like two of those U-locks kind of in access for each of the like kind of two units would be, I think would probably be sufficient.
Okay.
Any other, Marina?
I have a question. I'm just trying to follow through this. So basically, these are 2-bedroom units. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, they're 2 bedrooms with a room that could arguably be a bedroom if you wanted to make them a bedroom, but could also be a utility room or an office or a flex space.
That's the thing you label as an open area or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a lot of building for 2 bedrooms. Just curious about it.
These are things we talk about a lot. I think there's gonna be a lot of configurability. The Western buildings are planned as condos, so I think the buyers will be able to influence a little bit of how that actual third space is used. But
Okay. Marina, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Evan was saying, because I think the idea would be with adding more bike storage, like it may be the case that today it's not ideal to necessarily lock a bike overnight, but if we're talking like long term, I think the idea is that these would be residential units for a long time. So ideally we would be building something for long-term bike use. So I think that would be just my build on the bike discussion.
Yeah. Miles?
Yeah, a question about the gravel wetland. I do see that it looks like it's under drained, so you're not really going to be increasing the infiltration in that zone. But is there any concern for loading water and raising groundwater under that abutting building to the west? Does that come up with the engineering?
I have not discussed that with CEA. I'm happy to have that conversation after this.
Yeah, I mean, you're directing a lot of stormwater to the corner of the property near that building. If they have a basement, it's a possibility that you could, increase the water movement into that basement. So
that building doesn't have a basement. That building is parking at the ground level. Oh no, I don't think that building has a basement at all. Sorry.
Okay.
But I'm certainly happy to. I know CEA has done soil sampling on site to, whatever depth they felt comfortable with to determine this plan. So.
Right. It's good to be aware of potential, redirecting of water towards your neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely.
One additional question, I think going off of, I think it was Brad's question, and Caitlin, but the walkway and kind of cut through the parking lot to get to that cut through of the grass, it's hard to tell on the pictures. Does that have a full curb? Like, if somebody were to be in a wheelchair, would they be able to cross to the sidewalk through the parking lot to that walkway, or would they have to go up over a curb?
I don't think there will be a curb there.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, just following up on that. A lot of times people use a curb as a wheel stop for the cars. Otherwise, I think your neat row of trees along the parking area seems like they'll be vulnerable. People just drive right into them. That's why I wonder if you may be planning on having curbs.
Well, I guess I don't have that detail on the plan, but certainly when I look at this and I see the ADA spots, I imagine that if there's a curb for the majority of the northwestern part of that lot, that it will be handicap accessible for that ADA section where people are intended to load and unload and transition from that section onto the park walkway.
And those
Brad,
ADA spots are associated, is this first unit in what is this building B? Is it accessible unit?
The easternmost unit, I believe, is the handicap accessible unit.
Okay.
You just need one?
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? Sharon, you had raised your hand earlier to speak on this item. Do you have comment you would like to share?
Yes, I have a couple of comments. My own opinion is that the buildings or the drawings, they look like a prison. They're not attractive, but that's neither here nor there. That's my opinion, but natural light. So it looks like there are some large windows, but are the windows spaced such that all rooms have natural light? I think that's so important. That's a question that I couldn't pluck out of the materials submitted, and they were very helpful materials submitted. Thank you. There are steel railings on the walkways, and as someone that does a lot of door knocking for my current job, those freeze and get slick. And I just wanted to understand if anybody ever thought about how sometimes they're not that good in winter and cold and icy climates. So just throwing that out there. And then the information says that currently the lot, 2/3 of the lot is open green area. And obviously this is very intense development. It used to be RL, RM, but now it's all RM and allows you to do that. But there's reference because of such development that there's some central green area for people to enjoy. I didn't really see that. So maybe I would very much appreciate the applicant pointing that out, or maybe if the DRB feels like they know where it is, okay, but I couldn't really ascertain where it was. And then the only reference that I saw around trees was, that if you have so many parking spaces, there's a requirement for some shade trees. Thank whoever wrote that in some ordinance, because I don't know the vegetation you're removing. I saw the picture. I haven't gone to the site. Normally I take the time to do that, but I haven't. So just full disclosure. But once again, my concern is that when all these changes were made, and I'm a planning commission junkie, so I follow all of the ordinances from beginning to end. There was a promise from the now gone planning director that preservation of mature trees, etc., would be part of this ordinance hand in hand because of the importance of it environmentally. I know I'm a broken record, but I am, because it's not important to anybody, and I think it's going to be a big regret for quality of life and the amount of heat that gets generated by loss of green space and without having that shade. So having said that, if the applicant could at least identify where the open space is for these new people to enjoy, because I want them to have good quality of life. And if there are any mature trees that are being cut down, could you entertain, and they're not in a building footprint, could you entertain preserving some of those? So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. The applicant team is welcome to respond to what you heard from the comment there, but you don't need to if you feel like you've addressed those points. And you are on mute, James, if you are speaking.
Thank you. The green space is in the center. The trees are all locally chosen to best fit the environment. They're native. And yeah, currently the eastern part of the property largely not in the flag is the part that's open right now.
Thank you. Any last questions from the board? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing on this item, and we will move on to ZAP-24-10, 164 North Willard Street. This is an appeal of an administrative decision. So in the case of appeals, the city will go first. Again, trying to keep our testimony short. So whose project is this? Scott, is this you?
So Steve Cormier, our code compliance officer, is here tonight primarily to address this, but I may weigh in as need be.
And I guess I will follow my previous statement before we jump into that. If everyone who wants to speak on this item can use the raise hand feature so that we can identify you, and then I will swear in everyone at once. And that includes in the room, and I apologize for my dog barking in the background. So those of you wishing to speak on this matter, if you will raise your right hand, do you swear that the testimony you give today is true and correct under pains and penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Over to you, Steve, to give the city's stance on this.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? This appeal is about the handling of, sorry, just looking at my notes. This appeal is about the handling of complaint records 24-103 and 24-104 that resulted in decisions of complaints being unfounded on August 9th, 2024. Complaint 24-103 was about shed foundations at 172 North Willard Street being installed within a setback. There are two shed foundations at 172 North Willard Street, one in the northeast corner of the property, one on the north side of the property. The northeast corner shed was permitted under ZP 23533, with that permit's site plan showing a 12-foot by 18-foot shed compliant with setbacks, but also referencing a gravel pad of larger size, 16 feet by 22 feet for said shed. ZP 23533 was found in compliance on 12/19/2023 by the previous code compliance officer without catching the discrepancy of the gravel pad extending into the setback, but that decision was not appealed within 15 days of that code compliant officer's decision. The north side shed was permitted under ZP 23560. The site plan for that permit showed a 12-foot by 28-foot shed and gravel pad of larger size, 14 feet by 32 feet, compliant with setbacks, along with a 2-foot by 32-foot stepping stone walkway on gravel along the north side of said shed, encroaching into the setback on that side of the property, as allowed under CDO 525B, exceptions to yard setback requirements. ZP 23560 was found in compliance on July 17th, 2024 by myself and was not appealed within 15 days of my final decision. Complaint record 24104 is about a fence at the 172 North Willard Street property installed onto the neighbor's 164 North Willard Street property. The fence was permitted under permit ZP 23560. Under that permit, the only fencing installed at 172 North Willard Street that approaches the 164 North Willard Street property is located at the eastern end of the 172 North Willard Street driveway, running north to south from a southeast corner of the primary 172 North Willard Street structure to the property line with 164 North Willard Street as depicted under the site plan. It encroaches into the setback as allowed under 525B, while the fence's southernmost post is installed on the 172 North Willard Street property as determined by a stamped survey attached to that permit. The southern property boundary of 172 North Willard Street corresponding with the northern edge of the primary structure at 164 North Willard Street. ZP 23560 was found in compliance on July 17th, 2024 by myself and was not appealed within 15 days of my final decision. Ultimately, the complaints are unfounded as the shed foundations and fence at 172 North Willard Street property conform with their approved and finalized zoning permits.
Thank you. Does anyone from the board have questions for the city before we turn this over to the appellant?
I guess I just trying to follow this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the survey here, boundary retracement survey plat. Is that the survey that you referred to in your commentary just now?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
And I think that shows the items that you were discussing.
The survey I'm referring to is titled 23362 Tamulonis PL1 Mylar stamped. It's attached to zoning permit 23560. I'm not unfortunately sure what you're looking at, Brad.
I can pull it up in a second, Steve. It's just taking a moment to load.
Okay, thank you.
While we wait for that to be pulled up, does anyone else from the board have questions for the city? Here we are.
Yeah, is this the survey that you're talking about?
Correct, sir.
Okay, that's what I was looking at too. So, okay.
Yeah, I do have a question about that survey. I think what I see in that survey that's quite important is that there is a 5-foot maintenance easement that extends onto 164, but is there maybe confusion that maintenance easement, which is typical for allowing the neighbor to maintain a fence or something, is that being confused as a setback? I guess that's how I've been trying to go through the record and diagnose this, but I'm wondering if the city can confirm that is there a 5-foot setback for a structure or a fence, or is that just a maintenance easement?
As I understand it, the fence can encroach into the setback.
Yes, and just a reminder, easements and property rights are not within the zoning board's authority, so we are just looking at the property lines.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. With that, we will turn it over to the appellant. Just a reminder to keep your commentary brief to 6 minutes, if you will. And a reminder that we have read the submit materials that are posted online.
Okay, hi. My name is Christina Waterback and I live at 164 North Willard, and I've been to a number of these review boards, other issues, and it might feel a little bit like Groundhog Day seeing us here because we've been here before. And I want to start by saying that I feel very nervous because we have been asking questions of code enforcement to help us solve a problem that we see at our property, and that we have been pinned as bad guys. And I feel like this is getting personal, and that I feel like we're allowed to ask questions, and I don't feel like we've received support to ask questions about why was why were these labeled as unfounded decisions? Like, that is what part of the reason we're here is because I don't understand what the word unfounded means. I don't know how to advocate or try to support my family when something is listed as unfounded. It's also really hard to hear that these things were listed as unfounded, but there's a record that Steve called our neighbors and gave them a way to fix a problem that we were asking for help with. And we were not afforded the same guidance. And you have read some of the things that have been said. And part of the reason I feel very emotional right now is that there have been some comments made about my family that don't belong in a zoning discussion. And so I am asking for fairness to be seen here, for us that both sides of the fence are treated equally. Our neighbors were told that they could cover up gravel and put it with dirt, and that would solve a setback issue. We are also here because our neighbors are complaining that our patio is in a setback, but we have not been told how to resolve that issue or been given guidance. Caitlin, I appreciate that you said that you are not here to talk about boundary lines and private land matters. We believe that all of the things that are currently in front of you can't actually be discussed in zoning because there is a dispute as to the property boundary line. I also think that we can't talk about a setback on our property. The complaint is that our property, the patio is in a setback, but there's no way to measure that currently if we don't know where the property line is. And the property line issue needs to be talked about in a civil case. So we are also here to ask, can we please wait to solve these issues until the civil side and the boundary line has been dealt with? I could talk about other things, but I think for me, the main thing is that there's a boundary line issue here that needs to be solved before zoning or code enforcement can help support both sides of the fence to solve an issue.
Thank you for sharing your commentary. I think The position that we're in as the board is having any of this in front of us, we have to use the boundaries as the surveys that are in front of us. Since we cannot, address any of those property rights issues. With that said, is there anyone on the board that has questions for the appellant?
I guess I'm going to just go back to that. Just ask the appellant who just spoke. So the survey that we have, that was not one that you had requested being done. Is that
No,
right?
we did not.
You did not. Okay. And you have not requested a survey.
We requested a survey a few years ago about the other side of our property. And in conversation with our survey at that point, things between our neighbors on this current fence in question, things were going well. And we were under the impression on both sides of the fence that things had been like this for 15 years and that we really should we were happy neighbors, good fences make happy neighbors, right? And that's where we were when we had a survey made.
And what precipitated the action right now?
There is a question as to whether or not our fence is on their property. And we believe that the neighbors are using zoning to change personal land rights. And that by using that process.
And am I right? You know that you think one of the fence posts is against your house? Is that?
Well, yes, there is also a fence post that is touching our house. If we needed to remove our siding for any maintenance, we would not be able to because it's jammed up against the house.
So just so I'm clear, just looking at these drawings. So is the concern of the fence that is within the property line, or it's that little dog leg off the back of the house? Is that correct? That goes in a little bit and doesn't follow the line of the house? Is that the one that's on the drawing? I don't know if we can bring up and the Mylar stamped drawing, if we can bring it back up again. So kind of zooming in. So just to be clear, the fence that is supposedly encroaching is this little like jut in and then over like the run to the back. Is that correct?
So the fence that's touching our house is not on the survey.
Okay. But the fence that is being accused, so you said your neighbor is accusing your fence of encroaching within their property line.
That is
that fence.
Yes.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that. Is it just a process curiosity? Is it within the power of the board to delay a decision on this pending a civil matter? I know we've kind of done, I would say the closest I can think of is parking, the use of that one space near Memorial Auditorium for parking. But is it within our power to even delay based on a civil matter?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so, but Scott, address that.
We have Attorney Sturdivant available to answer that question, I believe. Kim, if you want to pipe in.
Yes, I think that is fair for us to address with Kim.
Good evening. I can take a closer look at the regulations regarding that. I mean, typically your decisions have to be within a certain time frame after you close your evidence. But I would be concerned about holding open a pending matter for the length of time it would take for another matter to get resolved in court. Certainly there are instances if there is a property line dispute and a zoning dispute where things have gone to the court in roughly the same amount of time and they get addressed and held at the court level. But I think it would be difficult for you to hold something that long, because a court case could take, a year or more. And so to have that pending on your docket that long, I'm not sure that there's anything that says that you can't do it, but I would just, the practicality and the concern of it is there.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board for the appellant before we take public comment? Okay, seeing none, if you are in the public, if you could use the raise hand feature to let us know that you would like to speak on this item. I know we had sworn someone in, Melanie, if you want to unmute yourself, you are welcome to speak.
Thank you. My name is Melanie Janery, and I'm here with my partner, Margaret Tamulonis, and we would like to give separate public comments. We collectively collaborated on a document that we submitted and added a couple of things to that. And thank you for hearing us tonight. It's been incredibly stressful.
Can you identify your address just for the record?
Pardon, sure. Thank you. My name is Melanie Janery, and I am at 172 North Willard Street in Burlington, Vermont. So it's been incredibly stressful, this whole thing. Just to give a little background, which, I don't want to repeat too much. That's been in, for matters of time, everything's in the document. However, if you refer to page 211, of the version 7 that was uploaded, you will see a comparison of the built fence today that we're concerned about being on our property to an image of the little fence, that was there at one point. It's been incredibly uncomfortable to have that fence built on our property. We got a survey in 2023 that aligned with the Purvis's survey from 2016. We have a concern about the Purvis's fence dimension in the back, that the approved permit measures 66 feet, and that is actually a foot larger than their own permit, their own survey that was from 2016 that is in this document, possibly on page 187. And that in itself takes about 78 square feet from our property. I'm someone with a disability. I have long-term Lyme disease and long COVID, and my health is declining quickly. And I don't know if I will need accessible paths, but we are going to need that, square footage if we want to access our sheds for my own health and as we age. For other reasons, this is something that, in 1949, the land was divided. 50 feet was given out of the 100 feet that the properties had initially. In regards to the fence post that I put, when I did the fence installation, just to give a little background, we did the permit. We received some threatening emails. We try not to engage because we have seen from the neighbors at 164 and 158 over the years just exasperate, and it's with my health. I have heart conditions. It's not something that I can actively engage in on an ongoing basis. So we just, like when we received the complaint about the gravel, there was no mention about the fence. And a previous conversation a couple of years ago when we were talking about the shed, we had verbally talked about putting a fence line across the end of the driveway to give us more yard, but also as a barrier to protect the dogs from getting out. Over the years, Luke has been very sweet in helping repair the fence. Meg's elderly parents live with us, and sometimes we go away and, Tilly would get out and he would come over and help with the fence and, put on the door, and that was very sweet. But really, there was a need to put a more permanent structure, and he was very aware what we were going to be doing. When we received the complaint about the gravel and the setback, we were away, and the city, Garrett King, called me and let me know, and we had just installed the gravel, which was concerning because it seems to be in the last year, as soon as I do something on the property, I feel like I'm being watched all the time, which is really, really uncomfortable for my health and well-being. And I live in a state of hypervigilance, which is very difficult just to know I'm being watched. And I really didn't do anything to cause this. The neighbor built the fence on our property and we asked for it to be moved. And that prompted, they said like, hey, look, we won't have any problem with, the property as it is if you let us keep the fence. And there was a lot of emails coming, to us from them. And when we complained about the fence on the property, we didn't say anything about the setback, and we did write an email to them about that, and we got 4 or 5 emails back, just really long-winded. Most recently, Purvis has been claiming that we built the fence on his property, but what our surveyor says and has explained is that our property goes to the foundation of their house. So like even the siding overhangs into our property. When I put up the post, I think they submitted a picture. So I counteracted, submitted pictures, not knowing what was going to be held here. Even the picture on our side shows the fence post against the siding on our house. And there's actually a little bit of a gap if you look closely on theirs. And I had 2 people who work in the field come over and look at the siding and say, hey, look, is this a problem? I've changed siding myself. I've done repair and maintenance over the years. And I would personally be able to change that siding or, maintain it, wash it. And I had 2 other people look at it and they just really confirmed my understanding of the access to maintain the house wouldn't be a problem. And I really don't think that it's about that. If you look at the pictures that we included, you will see the large wooden fence is actually closer to Purvis's house than we put our fence post. If I don't know what's going to come out of this, but if the city review his case and find that, look, the fence on their side was approved on our property, and a new fence were to be, submitted, we would like the 2-foot setback to be because of the damage that has been, done to our property over the 2 years that the installation happened. The current fence is installed with star screws, and you really have to go on to our property. And we would like to be able to use that property for, our own joy and pleasure without risking, the neighbor coming on at any point. Because as it states, fences need to be maintained from your own property. And I'd like to refer to the general provisions in, I don't know if I'm getting the word right, but in the what comes with the approved permit. For number 12, it refers to properties involving boundary disputes. If there's a permit issued and contrary evidence, which we're reflecting, contrary evidence is the 65.05 on Purvis's own survey to a 66-foot approved permit. We are providing, his survey, which was ultimately uploaded in 2018 for another matter. So the city has had to unfile. He did not include that with his, share here. And while they say it's really exclusively on the other side, the way that our surveyor explained it was that they found a common boundary line, and that is at the 50-foot mark. Our deeds say 50 feet. I believe Purvis says at 50 feet, more or less. The original deed said 100 thereon. When we were, it was, what's that word? When you let something go ahead of time. I can't think of the words. It begins with a P. Sorry, I have brain fog. So a partial mortgage was discharged when their division happened. 50 feet was discharged from their mortgage, leaving 50 feet on the property. And at some point when it was rewritten, the word more or less was added. However, our chain of title does say 50 feet thereon continuous.
Melanie, if you wouldn't mind wrapping up your
no,
that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, no problem. And just really, I would love for things to stick with, the 4, 8, and 12 is listed, and also want to bring in the settlement. There's not been compliance to the settlement of 2022, which is at the end of our document. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we would now hear from Margaret. Is that right?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to thank, this is Margaret Tamilonis. I live at 172 North Willard Street. And I just wanted to make a quick statement about the situation as it stands that should add a little bit to the stuff that we submitted. Thank you so much for listening to this. I know that you've dealt a lot with the issues with 164, and I appreciate your patience. Our home at 172 North Willard Street was purchased in 2002, and I have lived in it since. I love living in the Old North End, and I'm grateful that we are now able to provide a home for my parents here. The past 2 years have been especially difficult as Purvis and Lauterbach have repeatedly harassed first me and then my partner Melanie with emails and opinions about how we should be existing on our very own property. They built a fence, as you heard, that takes over part of it, invading our space, and they ruined the backyard.
I just want to make a comment. It would be nice to hear the issues without dispersions or criticisms of one another. So if you can just keep it to the facts, it would be appreciated.
Sure. In 2002, I worked with the owner of 164. We had several conversations about the fence being located at the corner of his house and his needing access to the north side of his house via my driveway. He always made arrangements with me. In 2013, Purvis and Lauterbach moved in. There was no conversation regarding the fence, but because I had a dog that I was concerned was going to run into their busy driveway, I constantly worked on it. And as Melanie mentioned, Luke was sweet about maintaining it a little bit with me. In 2019, Purvis asked to purchase my backyard property because he hoped it would help him with some of the city issues he was dealing with over the years. I refused, fearful of what his actual plan was, and I was concerned. In 2020, my partner Melanie and I began to make plans to be co-owners. We'd been both long-term homeowners in Burlington. This would involve some improvements, including storage space and fencing so that her service dog could be safe in the yard. And we've worked closely with the city to make those improvements and conform to zoning requirements. And again, I'm really appreciative of this. In 2022, I informed Purvis that I could no longer be involved with his constant disputes with the city. He'd attempted to draw me into another dispute on North Street, etc. It was just taking up a lot of space for me. I had hoped that 2022 settlement he had signed with the city was sufficient, and my own family's health issues were making my spending much time and energy impossible. I found the whole issue and constant obsession about it on his part draining and exhausting. And I really do feel like, and it's not, they've turned on us, and now their child yells at us in our driveway, like she out of the window.
I just want to repeat Brad's comments of that's really not germane to the discussion here. If you can keep to the facts of this appeal at hand, that would be.
I do want you to understand, though, this has been a very, very difficult situation. So in 2022 into 2023, Purvis began building a large wooden fence, and we've outlined some of that stuff, so I can cut it. But in summer 2023, I pointed out to him that the fence was clearly on my property, and he apologized profusely, and then we received many, many texts and emails about us, including, as Melanie referred to, this threat to report us to the city if we stopped pressing them about the fence. And this didn't worry us because we've been working with the city, and we're very grateful for the guidance of city staff. Then they offered to pay, Purvis and Lauterbach offered to pay a small amount of money for the property they had engulfed, and we refused that. I just want to say I've been very personally fearful of communicating with Purvis and avoid him whenever possible because I have seen his I'm sorry, I have to tell you, I've seen his very angry behavior with other neighbors. I did not want us to be a target of that behavior. I've dreaded having to deal with this issue. Over the years, I have brought up the encroachment of that old metal fence, and I've tried, I was told it would be fixed, but now I feel like Lauterbach and Purvis are just ignoring that. Purvis has pursued, and this is truth, Purvis has pursued my partner to her car parked on the street, run down my own driveway after me, muttered homophobic words to me, and shouted after us from his window and taken pictures of us while hanging his torso out the window. This has been very threatening. Both For the past 2 years, especially, we have endured many glares and muttered remarks, repeated emails, complaints about our garbage cans, and what seems to be obsessive observation of our activities in our own driveway. We feel threatened and have received support from the Pride Center of Vermont to install cameras on our driveway, since Purvis has now been regularly and actively trespassing onto our driveway to erect what he calls barriers to block our bins, but they only block my mother, who needs to get into the car. So we've had to shift them around, and they've moved around mysteriously. We directly asked Purvis and Lauterbach to not go up and down our driveway without advance notice. As we understand, there's a need to maintain the north side of 164, but they have ignored this request, making us feel threatened and unsure that when things would be shifted around. I'm sorry to see that Purvis and Lauterbach
Can we just try to keep to the matter at hand?
I know there's a there's a lot.
I know there's a lot of
on this.
Okay, then.
But there's only one thing in front of us right now. It's an appeal of 2 zoning permits, and it would be very helpful to us in our process if you could stick to the appeal that is before us today.
Okay, please pay attention to the surveys and the lines that are there. There are 2 surveys that you see that show the correct lines. And and please look at the zoning ordinance, as Melanie has pointed out. I don't think you should grant an extension. I think that there shouldn't be this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board, Scott, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just really quick, Caitlin. You said there's 2 zoning permits under appeal. The zoning permits are not under appeal. They were approved, they were unappealed, they were inspected and closed out with final certificates of occupancy.
The finding of
right. So there were
denial
complaints filed by Purvis that there's a problem here. Steve Cormier went out, looked, said, no, there's not. And so Purvis is appealing that.
Thank you for correcting my misspoken statement there. I will hand it back to the appellant if you would like to address any of the statements. I would say you should not feel like you need to address any of the statements that are outside of our purview. We certainly understand what is not before us and we can ignore those. But if there is anything within the matters before us that you would like to address from what was stated, you are welcome to.
Thank you. One thing that I would like to bring up is the 172's site plans. Their site plans have errors. They do not depict the window wells of our property, and the little fence that we're talking about that goes between the 2 properties does not show our home. It does not show our house on their site plan. If that is the boundary line, it's not depicted on their site plan. Their site plan also their 2016 site plan and their 2020 site plan never depicted a fence on their southern boundary. So there are errors in their site plans that have been approved. Our neighbors have brought up the fact that we are not following a settlement with the city. And we believe we have been trying in good faith to follow that settlement. One of the provisions in that settlement was to provide a site plan. We provided a site plan. However, the one that was approved was not what we submitted. And it does not even have the elements of what is required by code enforcement to be included. So we feel like we are acting in good faith, but then we come up with a conflict with our neighbors, and the thing that we submitted to the city doesn't even follow your rules, and you approved it. It puts us in a very difficult position. The other thing that we would like to say is that there is a provision that lets us appeal any decision. Yes, there is time. There are 15 days. Our neighbors could have appealed our fence permit 2 years ago when they had 15 days. Our neighbor could have 10 years ago when we took down the first tree, said something. We really are struggling because we feel like we have reached out to the city for help. and because of other issues have been passed off as bullies and as just trying to be above the law. But the reality is that we are asking for help.
Thank you. I understand this is a difficult proceeding. Are there any final questions from the board? And I just wanted to confirm, is there anyone else in the room at Pine Street that had wanted to speak on this item? Okay, with that, not seeing any other questions or comments, we'll close the public hearing and adjourn the meeting and move into deliberative. Thank you all for attending.